Welcome in, Bills Mafia, and welcome back to the Go Bills podcast. I am your host and founder of the Go Bills podcast, Brett, back with another edition of the Go Bills podcast. I am joined here by my good friend, best friend, and best man that's going to be in my wedding from the Dollar or Less Food channel. He is a fellow YouTuber who has started off. He has a great selection of videos, different videos that you'll see me collaborating in, as well as other videos such as a video where we went to a Chinese restaurant and we had the worst Chinese food that you could possibly imagine. And we talked about the experience. It was awful, but we went with it. We tried to do it. It was a lot of fun. And he even helped me when I was sick during that because it was a nightmare. So if you haven't already, go check out Dollar or Less Food on YouTube. It is fun to watch. He has great videos, great comedy with it. There's different skits that we do as well. And it's just a good time. So go over and follow Dollar or Less Food. How are you doing, Dollar or Less Food?
Well, Brett, I'm doing pretty good. This is my first ever time I'm on a podcast, so that's pretty neat.
That's awesome, man. I'm glad to hear. I know it's a lot of fun. It's different. It's fun. You'll enjoy it. Have a good time with it. Roll with it, and just be yourself. That's the biggest thing I have to say for you. So let's get this thing going. I know that we talked a little bit in the group chat that we had going, and we're going to talk about the game against the Miami Dolphins and Buffalo Bills. It's a game where you're a Dolphins fan. I'm a Bills fan. There's a rivalry that's been going on for a number of years. We're kind of like I would say, friends when we're not playing each other, but when we play each other, it's a different ball game because we sometimes don't like each other, but sometimes we do. But I think about it going back from the 90s where we had Dan Marino as well as Jim Kelly going up against each other, and that was a great matchup. Now we have a new matchup where we have Tua versus Josh Allen, and that's going to be a fun matchup to see. And I know that we'll go back to last week for the Bills as well as last week for the Dolphins. Buffalo played the Jets at home. It was the first time the Buffalo was at home in 3 weeks after the snowstorm where we had to go to Detroit for the Cleveland game. Then we stayed in Detroit playing the Lions on Thanksgiving. Then we had another game on the road as well. And I know that we had success in those games. We won those games. And then now Buffalo's in the lead in the division. Miami's kind of slipped up a little bit. They're not having as much success running off of a 2-game losing streak, falling a little bit behind in the division, losing a little bit of ground. Tua hasn't looked the same. What do you think is the reason why Tua has slipped over the last 2 games, Jacob?
Well, I will say Tua, in my opinion, hasn't fully slipped. Tua, for several weeks, if I'm being honest, played slightly above what is expected of him. So we go for the point, Tua hasn't lost a game that he played the whole game for. And then my sound just totally kicked off.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, as I was saying, Tua played amazingly, better than expected. Now, realistically, with the offensive system that we have in place, we are playing plays that just don't match his skill set. I don't want to get into last week's game too much, but if you think about it with Herbert and Tua, the conversation is which one's better. Both might be really good quarterbacks. I'm not going to argue that. But if you actually paid attention, the plays being played, Tua was throwing passes that Herbert should be throwing, and Herbert was throwing passes that Tua should have been throwing.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I know that there's a lot of debate between the 2 quarterbacks. I know one went after the other one in the draft. Most people wanted for the Miami Dolphins to draft Justin Herbert, and that's debatable. I know it's going to be debated throughout their whole entire career. And while Tua has an injury history, Justin Herbert hasn't looked the same as he has over the past few years, where he's kind of regressed a little bit, just like Tua has. Tua is on the come up. He is a player who has the weapons now. He has Tyreek Hill. also has Jalen Waddle as well, Mike Gesicki, who's another player, as well as Jeff Wilson to go along with them. And they seem like a complete offense. They finally have the coach that they can rely on. This is a coach that's a lot of fun. If he wasn't in our division, I would say that this is probably the most fun coach in the NFL. But because he is a Miami Dolphins, I can't necessarily root for him other than when they're playing teams that I do want them to beat because it helps Buffalo in their standings. But I do like your coach. I think he's a great coach. You have a great GM as well in Greer. He's an excellent GM who has built this roster from the bottom up, and you have a good team that's coming along as well. So it's going to be fun to watch over the next few years as Tua and Josh Allen are going to be going up against each other, as well as Tyreek Hill versus the different cornerbacks that Buffalo will have. So, Paul, let's start this thing off. I want to start with the Bills on defense, and we'll start with the Dolphins on offense. We'll start right away. We'll start with Tua. I know that Tua, like we talked about with Tua, he's had a little bit of a regression over the last 2 weeks, and it's not the same Tua that he's been going to different receivers like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Do you think that it's more that defenses have figured out the scheme where they're running more of the different, like, I would say, what's the right word for this? Like a go route for Tyreek Hill, some post stuff like that. So you can figure that you can run like a cover 2 defense where you're covering Tyreek Hill deep. Jalen Waddle's kind of doing the over the middle stuff, cutting across the field, and that's where he gets open. So you can figure out the two of them. Do you think that it's just defenses have figured it out and you can drop 7 into coverage and that's what's going to prevent Tua from having success? Or do you think that it's just Tua's regressed over the past 2 weeks and nobody's really figured him out?
I think part of that is the run game. We got a new running back mid-season. First week he shows up, doing amazing. No one knows what to do. There's no film on him. So he's the freshest there. They see what he's doing the first week. Now he knows what he's going to do in that style of offense with those formations, and that's going to naturally cause a slowdown. There isn't a preseason when you trade midseason. That has to do with it. Also, with our tight ends, we need to do better in 2 tight end sets.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. I think that there's a couple of issues where it seems like over the past few weeks, they're just not gelling as a team. And I think that they're going to get it straightened out very shortly. This is a team that, in my opinion, is a dangerous team that Buffalo or other teams in the AFC could play in the playoffs, and they could upend almost anybody out there. They have a talented offense where they have explosive receivers on the outside. You have a running back who is coming from the San Francisco 49ers, just getting established into the playbook. I know it's kind of a similar playbook from what Mike McDaniels was running in San Fran, but it still takes time to get your feet going when you're with a new team, gel with the players, understand the offensive line that you're going up with, and just figuring out the different holes that you can hit. So that's going to be tough. But the run game overall for Miami over the past few years has been excellent. Talk about Myles Gaskin, who is with you guys as well. You also have Jeff Wilson, other players as well that have been contributing to the team. And I know that there's been some injuries on the offensive line, and Teron Armstead has been injured, as well as a few other players have been injured. So how much of the credit do you put on the running backs to not having success versus the offensive line being a little bit of a struggle?
So I don't want to use this as an excuse, but one thing that entirely changes the game when you have Tua in the lineup and when you don't is right-handed quarterback versus left-handed quarterback. Where's your strong tackle going to be? Realistically, with the inside line, guards are replaceable. A guard can play center if he has to. You cannot, in the NFL, put your weak tackle at center. We haven't had to worry about that, luckily. But also, you got to think about where's your strong set of the line. Oh, we got to come in. Backup quarterback comes in. We have to change 3 linemen just because of that.
Yeah. It's difficult when you have to change the whole entire line, especially when you have a different quarterback going in. And your backup quarterback, I'm trying to remember his name. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but
Little Teddy.
Teddy, you also have another guy that's a rookie too as well, correct?
Yes.
I'm trying to think. Is it Thompson?
Yes.
Okay, Thompson. I was trying to remember his last name, and I was trying to remember him, but I mean, I know that he played the New England Patriots, and that was a fun game because he had Bailey Zappi versus Thompson, and it was kind of like, okay, what are we going to do here? Because these are two rookie quarterbacks that not a lot of people have heard of, but you also have Teddy, like you said, and it's difficult when you have a right-handed quarterback versus a left-handed quarterback, moving the whole entire line over and adjusting on the fly pretty much. So I do give a lot of the issues to the injury bugs that the Miami Dolphins have had to go through, which is the same thing that Buffalo had to go through earlier in the season. And for Buffalo, it was difficult because we lost Matt Milano. We lost Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. Tre'Davious White was out for the beginning of the season with the ACL injury. So there's a number of injuries that both teams have had to go through, and it's just different points in the season. But I do think as the season goes on, when Miami starts to get healthy, especially on the line, and especially with Tua, I'm sorry, being healthier, and I know the concussions have had some play in that as well. But everybody says one. I'll debate that. I'll give you the one because that's technically the one. But I mean, I don't know how many times I have to see somebody's hands go numb where it couldn't. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's you. So I'll give you the one, okay? But it might be a little bit more. So that's a little bit of a debate on that. We'll keep that in the comments. I would love to see some comments about different fans. What do you think? Do you think that Tua has more than one, or do you think he has just the one, like Dollar Less is saying? So let's go over the receivers versus the cornerbacks in this game. This is the best matchup, in my opinion, for the game, as you have Tua throwing the ball to Tyreek Hill, who's going to be guarded by Tre'Davious White, as well as Jalen Waddle, who's going to be guarded most likely by Dane Jackson. And what do you think, Dollar Less? What do you think are the keys for the Miami Dolphins to have success in the passing game versus the Bills?
I think the biggest thing is separation 14 to 18 yards from the line of scrimmage. Noticing how those separations are happening, how tight coverage is being played, the style of coverage to determine where the ball can land and where it can't go. I feel like Tyreek is just going to go. There's probably going to be 3-4 passes, just hoping goes there. Tua's probably going to underthrow 2 of them. Let's be honest here. But I think the middle of the field is going to be important. But I don't think it's going to be a strict cover 2 because there will be too much separation there.
Yeah, that's going to be a difficult task because I know that Tre'Davious White coming off of the ACL injury versus Cheetah, who's one of the fastest receivers in the NFL. And this is an issue that goes back to the playoffs last year for Buffalo. The speed that they lost, especially with Tre'Davious White, the All-Pro, being out at the Thanksgiving, not being able to guard the number one receivers for different teams. Now you have to put in Dane Jackson as well as Levi Wallace, who Levi was covering the number one receivers for Buffalo. That's a little bit of a downfall, a big downfall, in my opinion, versus Tre'Davious White, who's an All-Pro. And now you lose somebody that can take away half of the field because you also have Jordan Poyer, who is covering that side of the field as well, or Micah Hyde being out as well. So now you're going to have to put Cheetah and Tre'Davious White as well as Jordan Poyer on that side of the field to take away the side that Cheetah's on. And then you have Jalen Waddle going up against Dane Jackson, where that's going to be a fun matchup for me because Dane's been a little bit of a head scratcher for the Bills, and he's regressed a little bit over the last few weeks. Many people would say that they're calling for Xavier Rhodes or different players as well as like Kyer Elam to start over Dane Jackson because they feel like he's just taken such a step back. And the matchup for me, if you have one-on-one coverage where it's Jalen Waddle versus Dane Jackson, I think that Dane's going to lose that battle every single time. Would you agree?
It's a peculiar decision, I'll say. I will say, though, also how the season's gone with Tyreek getting so much extra attention, Jalen's kind of in a weird position. I think he predicted this year that he was going to be more of a threat. Not that he hasn't, but he hasn't gotten the focus that I think he was expecting. So that, I think, is causing some of his performances to dip a little.
Yeah, I know that it seemed like both of these receivers are probably going to go for about 1,500 yards at the beginning of the season. Now, I know that Tyreek's getting the numbers. He's getting the catches. That's what normal number one receivers do. Look at Stephon Diggs. He has so many catches, but look at the number 2 behind Stephon Diggs. That's going to be probably either Isaiah McKenzie or Gabe Davis. And it's difficult when you have a number 1 receiver who's commanding the ball probably between 10 to 15 times per game. Then you have to throw the ball as well to the tight end. You have different slot receivers and stuff like that. And you can also get Jalen Waddle involved, who's definitely your number 2. But sometimes it seems like you can abandon that number 2, and that's the same way with Buffalo. So these teams, in my opinion, are very similar on offense because you have a guy like Stephon Diggs and Tyreek Hill versus Gabe Davis and Jalen Waddle. And I do think that Jalen is a much better player than Gabe Davis is at the present time. And I think that Gabe is starting to come into his own, and he's going to be a good receiver and a good number 2 for Buffalo for years to come. But Jalen Waddle is a number 1B, in my opinion, receiver. And I think that as time goes on throughout the season, Jalen Waddle is going to get better each and every week. You're going to see that progression where you're going to have to guard Cheetah. You're going to have to put 2 guys, 3 guys on him. And that's going to allow Jalen Waddle to become open more than not.
I agree. I think on paper, it's agreed that way, but I don't fully agree to call it a 1B. He's a number 2 receiver. I don't like the 1A, 1B personally.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna go with a couple comments on Instagram. Well, I'm sorry, on YouTube. We'll start with Red, White, and Bills. This is a page that I've been collaborating with left and right. They do a lot of good things for the Buffalo Bills. He says that Gabe will definitely perform better not being the number 2 anymore. I do think that that's going to be better for them. I know we haven't discussed it yet. I wanted to save that for when the Bills go on offense. But with Gabe being able to shift a little bit and not have to take that load on him where he has to be the number 2 receiver and that pressure of being a number 2 receiver, having a guy like Cole Beasley come in as well as John Brown to help him and have that veteran presence on the practice squad is going to be big. And just to have them and their presence back is huge because this is a team where the expectations are to win a Super Bowl, and not having as much pressure on yourself is going to be big. Another comment from Red, White, and Bills. He said, play bump and run in these wide receivers and they won't beat you. I do think that that's going to be the biggest play for Buffalo is to play press coverage on these different receivers as well as have the 2 safeties in DeMar Hamlin as well as Jordan Poyer being the guys that are going to be, I call it the center fielders in my opinion, where if these guys are running the go routes, you have your safeties back about 10 to 15 yards where you can prevent the deep balls going to Tua. And now Tua is going to have to utilize the middle of the field with the short passes, which is an area where Tua has struggled a little bit. And you also have a guy in Tremaine Edmonds who's a young, proven middle linebacker who can cover the middle of the field and has excellent range, as well as you will have guys like Greg Russo and Daquan Jones and Ed Oliver in the middle of the field who can get their hands up and get knockdown passes thrown by Tua. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. The linebacker is going to play a heavier role in this game than you think on paper. I know the cornerback matchup is the one that everyone likes to think about, but you got to think about what's realistically happening 65% of the plays in the game.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of plays where I do think that on both sides of the ball, the linebacker play from both teams, where you have guys like Matt Milano and you have Tremaine Edmonds, as well as the linebackers for the Miami Dolphins, who have been very, very good this season. And this is a defensive front on both sides of the ball that are going to be amazing for years to come. And they have I would say, in my opinion, there's a three-headed tandem for the best divisional defensive front in front seven. And that could very well go to the Miami Dolphins. It could go to the New York Jets. And Buffalo has a great defensive front. Well, I would say front six because we don't rely on a 4-3 front. But that front six that Buffalo has versus the front sevens of the Miami Dolphins and Jets they're almost as good, if not better, when you plug and play each team. So it's going to be a fun game to watch where the wide receivers and the play of the wide receivers versus the play of the defensive backs is going to be fun. There's going to be highly contested passes where I think that the coverage is going to be very good. I think this is a game, and I would love to see what you think, or less. Do you think that the penalties in this game are going to be high or low?
This game's being played. Only other game going on at the time, correct?
Correct.
Eyes are going to be there. There's going to be a bigger focus. There's a good chance they're probably going to let them play.
Yeah, I know on the side, Dollar Less, that you do a lot of refereeing, and I wanted to get your insight on that because we don't really hear from guys that have refereeing experience. I know you do a lot of refereeing back in your hometown, and I know that for refereeing, there's been some controversial calls, and this is something I do want to get your opinion on because this is something that has been happening over the course of the season. There's a new rule out there where they're starting it in 2023, where the NFL is talking about making it challengeable for roughing the passer calls on the quarterback. And this is, I don't know exactly the rule that they're going to go with, but I believe if there's a flag thrown for a roughing the passer, you will be able to review it. Now, I don't know, however, if there isn't a flag thrown for roughing the passer, will you then be allowed to challenge it? That's something that's up to the NFL to decide, and it's something that could be decided very shortly. But I would love to get your opinion. Do you think that this is going to slow the game down? And do you also think that this is a good addition to the NFL?
Short answer is it will not slow the game down one bit. As someone who likes things to be accurate, I somewhat like the idea, but it also, in my eyes, I don't want to say devalues the values of officiating by relying on technology. The reason why I don't think it's going to slow down the game is the NFL is a $1 billion business. They want a game that's going to run 3 hours to 3 hours and 5 minutes. They're relatively good at doing that in games that don't go to overtime. While I'm not saying that things are fixed and meant like that, the NFL knows how to get a game going on a clock. And if they realize that they're losing out on money because games are going too long due to something, and they notice that only 20% of these are being overthrown, there's a good chance that they'll remove the rule.
Yeah, I do think that that's something that will happen. If you look back a few years ago, there's the pass interference calls and the defensive pass interference calls where you could challenge them, whether it was a defensive pass interference where a flag was thrown versus a play where it was thrown and you could challenge the call. I think this is going to be an experimental 1-year thing, see how it goes. But I do think, however, that there has been at different points of the game. I look back a few years ago where it was Clay Matthews, and he had I think it was 4 or 5 roughing the passers called in the first few games of the season. And those are deciding factors in a game. If you look back at that call, that could have been a play where the team gets off the field and they're able to prevent points from being on the board versus the team got the first down. They're now driving down the field. They're 15 yards closer to the end zone, and then they get a touchdown. So I do like this rule. I think that this is something where different teams should implement that, but you do have to have a, I would say, some type of discrepancy in the rule, because this could be abused, and it could be something where different rules are being tweaked a little bit more. And I do agree with you that this is a little bit I wouldn't say disrespecting the official, but I would say it kind of degrades how the officiating is going to be called, because it is what you see with your eyes as officiating. So you have to go with what you see. And when you have to go with what you're seeing at the real time, I can imagine, whereas, a certain number of guys are calling a game and you make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes in the NFL. There's not a great referee who makes every single call on the field. Everybody makes mistakes. So I do think that it's a good thing and a bad thing, because I do think that whatever is called on the field should be in place. So if I'm the NFL, I would say that if a pass interference is called, you can review it and you can decide whether it was or wasn't. But if it wasn't called, stick with how it was, let them play it out, and then continue on from the play.
Part of the issue with that are a few things. It's what people think about certain things and their interpretation of words. Some penalties are different for how you determine it. If you have illegal use of hands to the face, where did the hand go? The face. Did certain contact make a true restriction? Was someone not able to catch a pass due to that restriction? Was that pass catchable if it happened, if it didn't happen? There are tons of things that just make that extremely more complicated. And by adding a second factor, I mean, I'm just going to say this as a football fan, as a Dolphins fan. There is still confusion both between the players, the league, the fans, and any other net partner about what a catch is. There have been instances where I've looked at the rule, I've interpreted the rule, I've heard someone else's interpretation of the rule, and both sides are correct at the same time, and they're two different calls.
Yeah. It's tough because, I mean, you got to go with what the referee is called. Now, you can decide, and I think that this is where something that the NFL can implement more is, instead of having a instant replay, you have a veteran, I would say somebody that's recently retired, like an Ed Hockley or somebody like that, who is a senior referee to the NFL, who can make the call that you see on the field. So you can go to that player or that referee, and he makes the overall decision for what should be called on the field, and that's the decision. I think that that's a good way to improve the game, and it would prevent stuff from being decided right there, right then and now. Now, I do think that whoever is the head person can use the instant replay, review it, decide, and then that's the call.
In that point, would you say that this other person should adjust to the placement of the spot of the ball? Should that also be able to be controlled?
Yeah. I think everything should be able to be controlled.
I don't think someone that's sitting 40, 50, 100 feet away at a different angle that isn't at that line should be the one who's saying, oh, we should spot the ball there. Why is it a lot of times we think something's a first down and it's not, due to the angle of the camera, the way you're viewing it? We're not viewing it straight on.
Yeah, there would be certain plays where it would be tough, but I do think that somebody that can utilize instant replay, being able to utilize all the analytics that you see in the NFL, all the different angles that we have on different cameras and stuff like that, you can utilize that and make a decision for where the ball can be placed. And it's tough. I know that the NFL has emerged from 100 years ago in the technology that we currently have, and the technology is only going to get better as the years come on. But I do think that there should be a senior person that can decide what happens on a play, just because that person is somebody that has a ton of experience and somebody that can override different decisions on the field. It's difficult, and maybe the instant replay is the best method, but this is just an idea of what the NFL could go with in the near future.
If that would happen, it would make most sense to replace the replay official with that person and then having to get rid of replays.
That's what I'm saying, is get rid of the replays completely. Don't have it where all the referees or the head referee has the ability to replay. I think that it should be all of them that are on the field go over. There's a head of officiating that goes with them. They all review it at the same time. And then when you review it at the same time, the final decision is made from the head referee or the referee that is in charge of reviewing the instant replay, which would be somebody that's like a supervisor of the NFL in officiating. Somebody like that, like a Dean Blandino who retired and is now an analyst. I wouldn't say him, but somebody that's retired, like an Ed Hockley, somebody like that. And he is in charge of the overall officiating for the entire NFL. He comes in, he goes with the replay on that, looks at the replay. He decides what he thinks is the best call. Then you can decide. He decides it. The head referee says it to the stands and everybody, the teams. Then that's the final decision.
Okay.
It's something that, it could be a bad decision. It could be something that, it causes controversy. But I just think that that's a different idea that the NFL could evolve into. But many people are going to have different opinions, and we'll see where it goes.
There are a lot of factors that got to be put involved here. And realistically, there's no proper answer.
Yeah, it would be tough. I mean, no matter what, there's no proper answer. It's officiating. It's tough. Let me just disconnect this. I apologize about that. I'm just disconnecting this because I think I lost you. Are you still there, J. Paul?
I'm here.
Okay, I can hear you now. Sorry about that. I did lose you on there. I think I lost you with my headphones, but I still have you now. I can hear you good. You're good to go. It just was going through. My headphones were going through my phone. So I wanted to pull up the injury reports for both teams real quick. Just bear with me 1 second. I apologize for the wait, guys. I just wanted to get this over with. The injury reports for both teams. Let's go with the Miami Dolphins to start. Did not practice was Teron Armstead with a toe injury, as well as Eric Rowe with a hamstring injury, Jeff Wilson with a hip injury. Limited today was Teddy Bridgewater with a knee injury, as well as there's a tight end Durham Smythe, who has a quad injury. Full practice today was Landon Roberts with a rib injury, Tyreek Hill full go with an ankle injury. Justin Zimmer, who formerly played for the Buffalo Bills, a defensive tackle, excellent defensive tackle that you got there, and somebody that I thought that Buffalo should keep. Was a full practice today with a back injury, as well as Cater. I'm going to say it wrong, but Kou with a thumb and neck injury as well. So a little bit of an injury bug for the Miami Dolphins. We'll go with the Buffalo Bills. 3 players that did not practice, all starters. Ryan Bates with an ankle injury, Matt Milano with a knee injury, Jordan Phillips with a shoulder injury. Limited today was Reggie Gilliam with an ankle injury, Ed Oliver with a pec injury. Full practice today was Josh Allen with an elbow injury, Mitch Morse as well with the elbow injury, and Cam Lewis was full with a forearm injury. So both teams, I would say Buffalo, honestly, has more injuries than the Miami Dolphins. And the biggest one Ryan Bates being in, he's did not practice with the ankle injury. That's our starting right guard. And that's going to be huge for Buffalo if you don't have your right guard, as well as Matt Milano, who's the playing an excellent season, probably the defensive player of the year, in my opinion. Overall, I know that's a lot of debate, I'm saying, for Buffalo, but he's looked at a different level than he has over the past few seasons, as well as recently added from the Miami Dolphins, Jordan Phillips, who is back in Buffalo for a second stint. I'm sorry. And 3 players that are starters making big contributions to the team versus you got Tyreek Hill, who's back, a couple other players who are starters, Jeff Wilson did not practice for Armstead. So that's 2 players for the Miami Dolphins that are starters that did not practice versus 3 that are starters for the Bills that did not practice. So a little bit of debate. Let's move over to the defense for the Miami Dolphins versus the Bills offense, and this is going to be a fun matchup to talk about. I think the biggest one is we can talk about. And J. Paul, if you want to start this, I apologize for saying that, but dollar or less, I apologize. I keep saying that because you're my buddy. I know your name. Everybody's going to know your name now, so I apologize about that. Luckily, it's only going to my page versus dollar or less's page. I do apologize about that. So mistakes happen on camera. Hey, we'll live and learn. But the biggest thing I think that we can talk about is the offensive line for the Buffalo Bills versus the defensive line for the Miami Dolphins. And there's so many different players on the defensive line for the Miami Dolphins that they have. They have Christian Wilkins. There's a few other players that are going to make a big impact. And in my opinion, the biggest impact player in the game that the Bills must stop is Christian Wilkins. And I think that he's a player that if he's in the backfield, he's going to make a difference in this game. If he gets 2 sacks, if he makes a hit on Josh Allen, it's going to be an impact play because he's playing at such a high level this season. And Buffalo, over the last few weeks, has struggled with interior defensive linemen. And it's been Mitch Morse as well as Roger Saffold who have struggled so much when they're going up against these different defensive linemen. They went up against Quinnen Williams. And there's a few others they went up against, as well as Aaron Donald, who they had success at the beginning of the season going up against. But different defensive linemen who are interior defensive linemen have been the struggle for the Bills this season. So overall, who do you think, besides Christian Wilkins, will have a big impact in the defensive front for the Miami Dolphins versus the offensive line for the Buffalo Bills?
Quite honestly, you picked what I was going to talk about for Wilkins to be my primary point. But I honestly don't know. I think it's just going to be whoever's in the interior is going to be the most important. I don't think that the edge is going to be a huge issue because of McKenzie. It's going to affect how we're setting up our linebackers. So you need a fast guy. We can't just rely on. Van Ginkel can't cover everyone in the middle of the field.
Yeah, the other player that I was thinking of, and he's kind of been a little bit quiet, in my opinion, is Bradley Chubb. Chubb coming over from the Denver Broncos over to the Miami Dolphins, and I would say a little bit of I like him a lot. He's been a good player. He did have the 2.5 sacks a few weeks ago. And he also has 2 sacks over the last couple of games. But the impact player that you need somebody, in my opinion, he is the player that Buffalo got in Von Miller. They're hoping that he would have the same numbers as Von Miller this season. And he does have good numbers. He has 5.5 sacks overall on the season. But you're looking for him to be that closer, and I think that that's the thing that the Dolphins were looking for in Bradley Chubb. And he hasn't been that closer necessarily for you guys. And if you can get him going, especially with Christian Wilkins, and maybe you get another interior defensive lineman in the draft coming up, I think that's going to be a great matchup, especially when you have Bradley Chubb, and you can utilize him in one-on-one, especially with Spencer Brown being up against Bradley Chubb. If they utilize that setup, Spencer Brown is going to get his tail handed to him in the game if they go one-on-one versus Bradley Chubb, because Bradley Chubb is an excellent linebacker / defensive lineman who has so many different moves. He's fast, he's physical, he can hit you with different moves in pass rush. And if you go one-on-one versus him and you don't put a running back as well as the right guard going up against Bradley Chubb, you're going to lose that battle. So, in my opinion, that next player that would be the player to watch is going to be Bradley Chubb. Would you agree with that?
Honestly, no. It just has to do with on-field presence. It's not just about your number of tackles. It's not about your sacks. It's not about your pass deflections. I'm expecting him to come in and be a presence on the field. And to my point, he showed up. He's done a good job. He's gotten in the backfield when he's needed to, but I don't feel like he's meshed with the team. And the best impact players don't always get the most tackles. They don't get the most sacks. If we pay attention to week after week, why is Milano so valuable? If he's not doing something, who's stepping up because they're prepared for him? I'm not getting that feel for Chubb. I'm getting that he's playing as a singular unit, not making the team better as a whole. He may have made his position better, but he did not make the overall core better.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. That's the biggest thing for me is if you get Buffalo, we got Von Miller. Von made everybody better around him versus Bradley Chubb, like you said. And that's a very good point that you said, because I don't see where Bradley Chubb made Christian Wilkins better. I don't see where he made Xavier Howard better. I don't see where he made different guys better. But the reason why you brought Bradley Chubb in is because he can make a presence in the pass rush game. He can put pressure on the quarterback, which will allow the cornerbacks to be able to get interceptions. They'll allow them to get off the field on third downs, and you have a closer. That's the difference between a guy like Von Miller versus Bradley Chubb. And Von Miller taught Bradley Chubb. So that's kind of crazy that when you bring him over to the Miami, and I just think that he just needs to gel a little bit more, get the playbook underway, and he'll be fine. But Bradley Chubb is a great player for the Miami Dolphins, but I just think that next year is going to be his year where he's going to have success with the Dolphins. And he just signed a big contract with you guys, and he's going to make a big impact for years to come, especially in a division where right tackles, honestly, for all three teams, are the biggest struggle for the offensive line, in my opinion. I know that the Patriots have Trent Brown, but if you look at overall the different players on these teams, you look at the Jets. The Jets do have a decent one, but I just think that Bradley Chubb is way better than the right tackle for the Jets. I think that he's way better than Trent Brown, and I think he's honestly better than Spencer Brown. So it's going to be a battle for years to come where if whoever gets their right tackle fixed going up against Bradley Chubb is going to be a fun matchup, in my opinion. And I look back years ago and think about this. It's something where you can think about Buffalo versus Miami. Buffalo in the 90s had Bruce Smith, and they moved Bruce Smith across the line. And I think of Bradley Chubb next year, and I think that I wouldn't say he's going to be Bruce Smith or Reggie White or Lawrence Taylor or Von Miller or different players like that. But I think that definitely Bradley Chubb could be up there with these different guys coming up. And he could have 10 to 15 sacks per year for years to come. And he just needs to move. He needs to get his steps a little bit quicker, be quicker on his feet, make him move a little quicker, and shed the blocks a little faster. And that's when he'll get to that level. But I don't think necessarily it's on Bradley Chubb. I think it's just a couple of tweaks that you guys need to make on the defensive front that'll make him better, especially interior defensive line. because you're having the double teams with Christian Wilkins. You're going to have Bradley Chubb. Sometimes he's going to be double teamed as well. So if you just get somebody in the interior defensive line that can make an impact and pass the pass game as well with Bradley Chubb and Christian Wilkins, you're going to have a great team.
I agree with what you're saying. I think part of the issue is the way that the league has changed as a whole regarding the concept of a edge rusher or being an edge being a true default position compared to your defensive ends and your outside linebackers. It's a whole new specialty that 20 years ago, while we talked about the 90s, I would never have defined LT as an edge. I'm not going to say, oh, that's wrong, he wasn't, or he was. LT was absolutely amazing as a football player, and I'm just going to say I consider him a linebacker or a football player.
Yeah, I agree. He's definitely a linebacker. Keep going with what you're saying.
So my main point, though, is the idea of focusing and fixating on position for what he's going to do. I do agree that the right tackle is an area that our division has surprisingly been weakened for a while.
Yeah.
But so I see the opportunities there. I'm not saying that Chubb is a bad player. I want to be very clear. He is a very talented individual.
Yeah.
It's been the gel. That's why I haven't been looking for it.
Yeah. I think that gel is going to come, though. I really do. I think that he's a player that it just takes time. And right now he's trying to hone his craft with Miami. He's going to get better as the time comes on. But it's just going to take until next season. And I think that the biggest thing I would say is when you go to the summit, which that summit is with Von Miller, and it's with all the different defensive linemen across the NFL getting invited. You got guys like TJ Watt, you got Bradley Chubb, Von Miller, and different guys. And Von won't be able to be a pass rusher in that summit because he's injured with the ACL injury. But to learn from a guy like Von Miller and different players like that is going to be huge this year for Bradley Chubb. And I just think that he can take that next step. And don't get me wrong, I'm agreeing with you, Dollar Less, where he is a great player already. But just to be able to take that next step from a good player to an excellent player is what I want to see out of Bradley Chubb. And I think that he will be able to take that step next season with Miami. And I just think it's just going to take a little bit of time. He just needs to gel with his teammates, like you're saying, and it's going to come very shortly because this, like I said, this is a team that's excellent overall, and it's going to be good for years to come. I think everybody in the division now, you can finally rest your head on the fact that you're probably not going to see somebody in our division lose their head coach for probably 2 to 3 years. And it's crazy how almost every single year you look back and you see different guys like Rex Ryan. You can talk about Brian Flores and what happened there. But Adam Gase being with both the Jets and Miami. All these different coaches that have left the division, but finally I would say that all the teams in the AFC East finally have their coaches, their GMs, their rosters are getting better, they're deeper, and I think that these teams are going to stay together for at least 2 to 3 years, which is great because there's been so much turnover in the AFC East as far as coaches and GMs losing their jobs, and I do think that it's going to be years before you see them changing. So let's move on from that, and let's go back to the overall assessment of both teams. And we talked about the offensive line.
Do we want to talk about the Bills receivers matchup, or do you want to do that later?
That's where I was going to move to.
Okay.
I was going to go from the offensive line versus defensive line. Go into the we'll go with. I want to save the wide receivers versus cornerbacks for last because I think that that's the best matchup. So I want to move now to the quarterback, and this is fun to talk about, and I know you're going to love talking about this too, because the last few times that the Bills have played Miami, and before the game at the beginning of the season in Week 3, where the Dolphins beat the Bills 21-19, Josh Allen has had his edge over the Miami Dolphins each and every time that they played. And I'm not trying to give an ego over the Bills being much better than the Miami Dolphins. Don't get me wrong. That's not where I'm going with this podcast. But I want to know what is the I know what it was, but I want to know what can the Miami do to stop Josh Allen? And there's answers for this that I want you to hear your point of view. And I'm going to go with what you said. And I'm going to also say the reasons why I think the Dolphins will copy a recipe that we've seen recently. So what do you think Miami has to do overall to stop Josh Allen?
So the first thing that they need to do is their spy needs to actually have some spycraft. The Dolphins are notorious for allowing quarterback runs that should be way longer than they are because they're out of position. We cannot all out blitz. That will not work. We need to have a good control with our man and our zone coverage. The middle of the field needs to stay safe.
Yeah.
Instead of it being a middle linebacker, I'm more in this game an outside linebacker to be the spy, which may not make sense, which is going to allow some areas to have some 8 to 12-yard passes be completed. But I'd rather have an 8-yard pass completed than a 28-yard touchdown and a hurdle in the process.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about that. And the recipe that I was going for is what the Jets used in the first matchup versus the Bills. And the matchup that they chose was the 4 pass rushers rushing Josh, dropping 7 into coverage, and having Josh try and play hero ball. And that matchup that they utilized, where you have 7 drop into coverage and you have them stop Stephon Diggs. If you're able to stop Stephon Diggs, more than likely what was happening is Buffalo was stalling on offense because they didn't have a number 2 receiver that they could go to. Isaiah McKenzie was making drops. Gabe Davis was making drops. Even Dawson Knox was kind of invisible out there. So Buffalo has moved on. They've gone after different receivers in John Brown as well as Cole Beasley to be able to open up the middle of the field for Buffalo. But I do think that the biggest way to beat Josh Allen is by using the 4-man front, dropping 7 into coverage, like you said, with that spy there in case he takes off. Because if he takes off, you're going to have a spy there to stop him. And I do agree with that. But I think that you got to also keep Josh in the pocket and prevent him from going to the right side of the field as well. Where Josh is most comfortable is the right side of the field if it's on a play action or he's rolling out to his right and he's making a throw. If Josh rolls out to his left, he isn't the same player as he is when he rolls out to his right. So the blueprint for the Miami Dolphins to have success is drop 4 into coverage, have 4 people rush Josh, 7 in coverage, and have a spy where you don't allow Josh to roll to his right, roll to his left, and then let Josh become impatient, which is an area that he has struggled with over the course of the season. And I do think that Josh is going to get better. He's gotten better over the last few weeks of not turning the ball over. And a stat that's interesting is Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen both have the same number of interceptions, and it's not being talked about whatsoever between them. And you don't talk about Patrick Mahomes being an interception machine, but you talk about Josh being an interception machine. Both of them have 11 interceptions overall this season. And it's kind of crazy, but I do think that the area where the Bills will improve is the finding that number 2 receiver. But that's the recipe, honestly, for how different teams have beaten the Bills.
I agree. I was going to also say make sure Josh can't roll to the right was going to be the next thing I was going to mention. But you got that before I could say it. Also, the other thing that I see too that I'd like to mention too is controlling Knox. This season, as someone who does not follow the Bills as close as you are, he seemed to be quiet and sneaky. Last week he showed up when it mattered, but it seems like that's something that has been simmering and hiding. And then I'm afraid that matchup's going to connect and just go boom again. So I know we're not talking about it yet, but everyone's mentioned that Cole Beasley is going to be elevated for the game, most likely, and then that's going to be the focus. But I don't think he should be the main focus.
Yeah, I do think that he shouldn't be the main focus because I think that the main focus should be if you have one-on-one coverage where it's Xavier Howard versus Devon Diggs, that should be the main focus for the Bills. Then the next focus should be if there's a good matchup with Dawson Knox versus whoever is going to be covering Dawson Knox, whether it's Javon Holland or if it's another guy in there that's going to be covering him. That matchup, I think that Buffalo has a good matchup because you have an athletic tight end in Dawson Knox, and you also will have you have somebody that can cover the middle of the field with Cole Beasley, who can also, if you put him on the same side as Dawson Knox, Cole Beasley can be a little bit of the guy that's like the one that you think that the ball is going to go to, and he can be the guy that opens up the field for Dawson Knox. And I do think that that's mainly the reason why the middle of the field hasn't worked for Buffalo this season is because you don't have that threat where you have to worry about the middle of the field. Now you add in Cole Beasley, who is an excellent slot receiver, in my opinion. I think he reminds me the most of it, and this is a guy that Miami had was Chris Hogan. Buffalo had Chris Hogan. So I think that he's the biggest player that I think that he reminds me of, as well as Wes Welker. And the two of them, I think that he's as good as Wes Welker, but I think that Wes Welker is the one that reminds me the most of Cole Beasley. But you have Isaiah McKenzie, who's not the same type of player. He's not as good in man coverage as Cole Beasley was. Beasley knew where to be at the right time, no matter if it was zone or man coverage. Man coverage, Isaiah McKenzie struggles in. So I think that that's why the Bills are going to have they're going to have Cole Beasley come back into the game, and he's going to be the one that's going to open up the field for Dawson Knox. So I do agree with you there, dollar less, where it's going to be Dawson Knox being the number 2 receiver in this game.
I think the other thing, too, which we've completely ignored, is the run game.
Yeah.
We need to have Josh be the Dolphins need to have Josh be the primary runner for the team. Not because your running backs are bad, but because the more that a quarterback's running the ball, and what's the weather forecast again tomorrow?
It's going to be cold. It is expected to be between I think 5 and 7 inches of inches of snow. So it's going to be cold, and it's going to be a little bit windy.
So if he's running the ball, that's something that can happen very well. I know you have a cold weather quarterback, and that's totally understandable that you have the advantage in that aspect. But hits hurt when it's that cold. And your quarterback likes to play hero ball. Cold hits hurt more. You're going to have more reaction, more swelling. If he keeps trying to run the ball, he might take himself out of the game. I don't want that to happen for the purpose of the game, but I'd rather the quarterback be taking hits for a 4-yard rush than a running back.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And that's something that Buffalo is going to have to figure out with Josh, is because in most cases, I would say Josh is trying to get the first down. And I do love that aspect that he has where he does try and fight for the first down, and he has that ability to fight every single time. But sometimes you just got to take what the defense gives you and be smart and be available for your team and just take the slide. So I do agree with you there. However, I disagree with you on this, and that's the fact that I don't think that Josh needs to be the number 1 run option that the Miami Dolphins have to, or I don't think that the Miami Dolphins should want Josh to be the number 1 running option. I think that it should have to be either Devin Singletary or possibly even James Cook. And I think that if you're able to have Devin Singletary and James Cook be the number one options, and you're able to stop the run game for those two guys, then you have Josh in play, and you can have third and manageable situations where you can have third and longs, and you don't have to worry about Josh's legs nearly as much as you would in those situations. So I think that's why, in my opinion, you have to worry about Devin Singletary and James Cook on first and second downs, getting stops in the backfield, preventing Buffalo from having third and shorts. Now you have third and longs, and you can't utilize Josh's legs. He's going to probably utilize the play action a little bit in this game. That's an area where he's done a good job. Going with the middle of the field, which will be short yard gains. And if they're smart, you have third and longs. Now Josh would have to eliminate the middle of the field because he's probably not going to get the first down. He'll have to stretch the ball down the field, and you're going to have Josh where he plays press coverage, or he tries to press the ball down the field so much. That'll be a mistake for Buffalo if he tries to press the ball down the field on the outside, because I do think that Xavier Howard is going to be the difference between Buffalo having a good game plan versus Buffalo losing this game. Because if Xavier Howard gets at least one pick in this game, I think that the game is going to go to Miami. I really do.
I think this game can go three separate ways. This can be a very low-scoring, gritty game. This can be a high-scoring affair. Or this can just be an absolute blowout. I don't think the Dolphins are going to blow out the Bills. I think that if the game stays close and it's a low-scoring game, the Bills are going to win. If it's a moderate-scoring game, I think the Dolphins are going to pull it off. But if a team wins by more than 16 points, it's going to be the Bills.
I would say that the biggest thing for Miami to do is have long, sustained drives, do the exact same replica of what the Jets did in their first matchup in Week 9 versus the Bills. And that's have long, sustained drives where you keep Buffalo's offense off the field. You don't have as many drives where Josh is going to be in the game. That will allow Josh to have to press the ball down the field. And if that happens, he's going to become impatient. He's going to want to force the ball down the field. That'll allow your defense to have success in this game. And I'm just giving you the blueprint for why I think this, and that's because I've watched a lot of Bills games. And that's what's happened over the course of the last few weeks where he's done it. And I think that the keys for the Bills to have success is they're going to have to utilize the one-on-one coverages on the outside where you're able to have Xavier Howard versus Stephon Diggs. And whenever Stephon is one-on-one, throw the ball to him because he is a receiver who can go up against your number one. He can beat your number one cornerback. And then also I would say if the Bills are able to play Cole Beasley, I think that you can utilize Cole to be able to have other guys become open, like I said. You can have Gabe Davis become open because of that, and also Dawson Knox. So it'll take some pressure off of the different receivers. So I think that he can play the decoy in this game. And that's something that he did when he was injured. He was kind of the decoy when he was injured. And I think that will be where Buffalo will have success. Now, I do want to mention this dollar list, and this is something that many fans might not know. So let's talk about the practice squad real quick. And this is something that many fans won't know. And I don't even know if you know it. But the rules for the practice squad are this. In the regular season, a practice squad player can be called up to the active roster from a team up to 3 times. At that point, after the 3rd time, the practice squad player would then become eligible to move on to the active roster. At that point, if you don't call him up to the active roster, he no longer is allowed to be on your practice squad and would then be released. So Buffalo will have 3 games where they can decide if he goes to the active roster. My opinion is that Cole Beasley will play probably in the Miami Dolphins game, skip the Bears game, play in the Cincinnati game, and then probably the Patriots game. At that point, when the playoffs happen, you can keep them on their roster, and you would have unlimited amount of times that you can have these players go to the active roster, and you can have them called up to the active roster. So if you have a guy like John Brown, who already has been used 2 times this season, he now has one more time that he can go on to the active roster. You have Cole Beasley, who has 0 for the Bills. He had 2 games with the Tampa Bay Bucks, but that gets erased overall because he wasn't on the Bills. So now he has 3 times that he can go on the Bills and play. So that's something that's interesting to know.
Also, you have to think about, too, who can and can't be moved down to the practice squad. Got to think about what contracts can and can't be moved. Got to think about cap space. You got to think about salary. As much as it might be, as bad as it sounds, moving someone to injured reserve for a non-football related injury gives a spot a lot more easier than a guy who's on a 1-year contract and has no plans next year.
Yeah.
Not saying that the Bills are going to do that, but those are logistics. It's just because you have someone on your practice squad that can be elevated, who's going to be removed from the game day roster? Who's going to be dressed?
Yeah, it's going to be tough, but I mean, injuries do happen in the NFL, and it could be decided. So that's going to be a tough one. Let's move on from the quarterback. Let's talk about the run game. We kind of got into it a little bit. We talked about the run game for the Bills, and I'd like to highlight the 2 players that have been pretty good this season for the Bills and talk about them, and that's Devin Singletary and James Cook. James Cook has come on a little bit more over the last few weeks. He's been pretty much the number 1 running back as Devin Singletary's become the 1B. And this matchup for me, in my opinion, is going to be very fun because Devin Singletary and James Cook are going to be going up against a very elite defense, and especially a defensive front. So I do think that Buffalo will probably have to throw the ball more in this game to have success versus running the ball. And for Buffalo to have success doing that, they're going to have to utilize the play action in this game. So these running backs are going to have to be involved in the pass game, in my opinion, more than they will the run game. Would you agree with that?
In some ways, yes. I think Singletary needs to be more involved in the pass game. I think personally for this game, he's going to be your 1A. I think Cook is going to be the 1B for this game due to who's played in these types of games, these types of moments. Realistically, as crazy as it sounds, this game is going to control and almost decide who's going to win the division. Yes, I'm aware that there's another win there. But if you look at the remaining schedule for the Bills versus the remaining schedule for the Dolphins, which I'm getting ahead of myself, I'm sorry, you see that the Dolphins, if we win out, there's a good chance that the Bills are going to finish the season 2-2. And when we win out, we'll have that tiebreaker, and we'll win the division somehow. That or we're going to be a 10-win team and miss the playoffs. One of the two.
Yeah, that's a tough thing. And I mean, I do like Miami. Don't get me wrong. I like Miami. I like what they have as a team. And I mean, gosh, it's difficult when you see, like, in the NFC, you see a team like Tampa Bay who could make it at 8-9. And then you have a team in the AFC where you have a powerhouse in Miami on offense, and you have a team that's really good, and they might not make the playoffs. And they might be the 3rd best team in their division at 10 wins. Can you imagine that?
Yes, I can imagine a 10-win team missing out on the playoffs. I remember it last year.
Yeah. I know who that team was. No offense, but I mean, hey, the biggest thing for me is this, okay? And I want to have fun with this because, I mean, this is 2 buddies that are talking on a podcast. We're having fun, not taking it as seriously as, most people would. But here's the thing. Think about this. Go back to the early 2000s, okay? we had New England. Okay, New England was having success. We saw the Jets have some success with Rex Ryan. Then you have Buffalo and Miami, who were two teams that struggled for so many years. And we talked about it as we were growing up, man. I know we're the same age, live in the same hometown, friends for years and years and years. But over the years, we had pretty much from the early 2000s to now, we've grown as two teams at the same exact time, pretty much. Maybe Buffalo was you could say it was a little bit ahead as the 2020s evolved, because they've evolved where they had their quarterback a little bit sooner than Tua. But overall, these two teams, so many years where we were out of the playoffs, and we could talk about it year in, year out, where we're like, all right, we're not going to be in the playoffs, but maybe, we'll start the season at like 5-3. Maybe we make the playoffs. We have a good guy like Ryan Fitzpatrick. We have a good guy like Chad Pennington for you guys. And you have guys like that. And maybe we'll make the playoffs. Maybe we'll make it with Matt Castle. Maybe we'll make it with this guy. Maybe we'll make it with that guy. I thought we were going to make it with Trent Edwards. I thought we were going to make it with JP Lossman. There's different guys that I thought we were going to make it with. But every single year, we would text throughout the season. And almost every single year, it was the same exact thing. We would text each other saying, good luck at the beginning of the season. We have our confidence up. Then our confidence level will go from here at the beginning of the season to, okay, we're having success, so we're going to I'm going to bring it down a little bit so that you can see it more. Now we get to like 5-0. Our success is, we're thinking playoffs are up here. Then all of a sudden the losing streak happens where we go down. And that happens so many times. And it was like year in, year out.
It's like, I remember back in the day, it's like, it's week 14. We still have a 1% chance of making the playoffs. That was a good year. See, I think the thing is, as a Dolphins fan my entire life, this team, I always feel like I tell myself that it can't disappoint me, that I give it low expectations. While I'm going to always be a Dolphins fan as long as the team exists. I 100% accept that. I realize that if I never see a Super Bowl in my lifetime, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to change my allegiance just because. But a couple times, I've had some hope that came out of nowhere, and I've learned that it's just best not to have that. And so this year, it's positive regardless. I mean, if you think about it, it's like, oh, we had an 8-win season. That's good.
Yeah. I feel the same way, where I'm like, if Buffalo has an 8-win season, I'm thinking, okay, that's great. We're there. We're going to be there next year. We got all these pieces around us where we got Marcel Darius. We have Mario Williams. We got this guy and that guy. And then the next year comes along. And I have expectations at the beginning of the season where I'm like, man, this is our year. We're good to go. We got this free agent. We got that free agent. We picked up this piece. We drafted this guy. And all of a sudden, we draft that guy and he doesn't have success. And I think of Aaron Mabin. I think of different guys where it's like, man, these pieces could gel. We got the team. But no, we don't. We got EJ Manuel. We got all these different pieces. Aaron Mabin. We got all these different pieces that didn't have success and became busts. And the biggest one that I think back on was Mike Williams that we missed out on. There's so many different pieces that we missed out on, and we weren't having success in the draft. And not having success in the draft led to us overspending in free agency on different players because different players didn't want to come to Buffalo. They didn't want to come to Miami because we had to overpay them. But when we overpaid them, they weren't having success with their teams. Then you have success as a whole entire team because you're not getting the best free agents and the ones that really do want to come there. And you're not getting bargain free agents.
And then we have coaches and GMs that show up that really genuinely think, yeah, the Wildcat's going to work in the NFL. We legitimately thought that Pat White was going to be the new blueprint of an NFL quarterback.
No, I think they thought that Ronnie Brown was going to be the new quarterback of the NFL, or even Ricky Williams. I mean, Ricky Williams will be the new star of the NFL.
Think of all the players that realistically, if they were in almost any other situation, would have gotten offensive or defensive player of the year awards. Just think about it. If Cameron Wake was playing in Pittsburgh, he would have been a 2-time defensive player of the year.
And a 2-time Super Bowl champion. No offense, but I had to throw that one out there and take that jab. But I think about that, and I'm like, okay, think about Kyle Williams for Buffalo. If Kyle Williams would have moved from Buffalo to a different team, would he have a ring?
He'd be at least an 8-time All-Pro.
Okay, I'll throw it there. I'll take that one. You could say that, but I think about that where it's like all these different. At the same time, we had such good players on our teams, such players that we could be loyal to, we could be fans of, and everything. So it's just tough. But there's so many recognized fan favorites that you could go back on, like Cam Wake, Paul Postlowski for Buffalo, different guys that you can think back on. So it's so tough over the years, but we've evolved as two different teams at the same time. Now let's move back to the offense. We'll go back to the wide receivers and cornerbacks to wrap this up a little bit. That's going to be the best matchup, in my opinion, overall on the field for the Bills as well as the Miami Dolphins on both sides of the picture. And this one matchup, I mean, you have Xavier Howard on Stephon Diggs. That matchup is the two All-Pros going up against each other. Somebody in Xavier Howard, who had 8 interceptions not too long ago. Stephon Diggs, who has been an excellent receiver for Buffalo over the past few years when he came to Buffalo. So I do think that matchup is going to be fun to watch, and I think that that's going to be one where it's highly contested passes thrown to each other, or not to each other, but highly contested passes thrown to Stephon Diggs. And there's going to be plenty of pass breakups. There's going to be different plays, a lot of tackles and stuff like that. So I'm going to ask you this, J. Paul. I'm sorry, dollar or less. I keep saying it. I apologize. So I'm going to say this. We're going to keep going with that. We'll move on. We're going to fake it till we make it. But I'm going to ask you this. The matchup of Xavier Howard on Stephon Diggs. When you have a receiver that's very crafty with different routes and stuff like that, you see it when you're a referee, and you see it when there's teams that come out onto the field, and you know that I'm not saying that Xavier Howard can't stop Stephon Diggs, don't get me wrong, but you know that there's a receiver on that side of the field that you must stop each and every play. What do you think Xavier Howard will have to do to lock up Stephon Diggs in this game?
What I would say, this is the advice I would give in almost no other situation, but this is one. You got to get in his head. Stephon Diggs has had some issues with attitude, personality, and just field presence at times. Great receiver. If we're going just true athleticism versus athleticism, I think Diggs is the better player in this matchup.
Yeah.
However, Howard is crafty. He can get into Diggs's head. He can pull her out a certain way. Howard knows how to hold and not get caught.
Yeah.
And that's what the big thing is there. When you have a player like that, you know that he's getting contact every single play. Is it technically legal? Most likely not. Is it going to be called? No. Because you have star versus star. If it's egregious, you're going to get called. So you're going to get a little bit more tugging than you think. You're going to see a little more arm restriction than you think. And it's probably not going to get called, realistically.
More than likely, what I see in this game, and this is something that Michael Irvin on NFL Network talked about a while back, and he said when he was a wide receiver in the NFL, cornerbacks were telling cornerback coaches were telling the defensive backs that when you're going up against a receiver like a Michael Irvin or somebody like that, you're supposed to go after his pockets. That's how you don't get caught. So I think that that's going to be where Xavier Howard is going to have to kind of hold a little bit. Like you're saying, I do agree with that. And I think that that's going to be the way that Stephon will have some issues in the game. If in that case, if he does have issues in the game, is by doing that. So it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a fun matchup. Don't get me wrong. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to see. But I think that the biggest way that Stephon cannot have success in this game is by that. Let's move on from that. We'll move on to we're going to talk real quick about special teams overall. And we'll talk about that real fast because I know you don't want to talk about the special teams of in one particular area, but I want to talk about the two kickers that are going to be in this game. And this could be the biggest impact on the game because the weather conditions are going to be a little bit tricky in Buffalo. You have the swirling winds coming off of Lake Erie where you don't really know if it's going to be a fast wind. Is it going to be swirling? What is going to take? And you have two really good kickers in the game in Jason Sanders versus Tyler Bass. So that's going to be a fun matchup in this game because whoever, in my opinion, whoever pretty much makes the most kicks is probably going to win the game. And whoever makes, it's not going to have to be the longest kick, but whoever is the most accurate is probably going to win the game. Would you agree?
Yes, 100%. The thing that makes me nervous about kicking, I am a huge. I'm a big Sanders fan. I'm not gonna mince words about it. I have a special attachment to the special teams players because they're the ones that historically had been the ones I can rely on over the years. He's had one bad game this year. Historically, he has two bad games a year. So, and when I say bad games, I'm talking missing 2 or more kicks.
Yeah.
And I'm not counting half-ending kicks, over 55-yard kicks. I separate those from away. If I'm expecting him to kick a 58-yard field goal with the wind in his face with 2 seconds left in the half, and he misses it, I'm not going to put that against him.
Yeah.
But just easy inside 50, regular time. He's had one bad game in my eyes.
Yeah, I agree with that.
This wind is a tough one to kick in. I'm not afraid of him kicking in this weather. He's kicked outside before. He's kicked in wind before. He's a reliable player. His extra points have been good this year. He hasn't dipped an extra point percentage like some other kickers have.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you what you're saying there. And I think that this is going to be a game, like I said, I mean, the wind is going to be tricky. It's going to be tough. And last time I went to a game in Buffalo, it was the Miami Dolphins and Buffalo Bills game at home. And the conditions were so much better than this game was. And that game was on Halloween. This game being in December in Buffalo with swirling winds as well as the amount of snow that's going to fall. Those conditions, in my opinion, they are going to be tricky for both kickers. And it's going to be a tough conditions overall for special teams, not only the special teams for the kickers, but also for the punters as well. These punters are going to have to kick into the wind. They're also going to have to be able to change their directions because the wind could be swirling across the field at certain times in different directions too. So that's going to be a tough match, both of them. Well, let's go over the keys to the game for both teams. And I want to talk about the keys to we'll start on offense for the Bills versus the defense for the Miami Dolphins. And we'll go 1 versus 1. Okay, so I'll say 1, you say 1. We'll go with 3 keys to the games for the Bills versus 3 keys to the games for the Dolphins, okay? So the first key to the game for me is going to be attack the middle of the field. And if you're able to attack the middle of the field, which is an area that Buffalo has struggled with over the past few weeks, and as well as pretty much the whole entire season, and if you're able to target the middle of the field, that's going to open up the outside, and that's going to allow different receivers like Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs to have success in this game.
Okay, my first key for the game is contain. Everything needs to stay in front of you. Do not get beat. In any situation here, we cannot get beat.
Okay, I like that one. I'm going to say the second key to the game is utilize the play action in your favor to let Josh be able to roll to his right and make big plays in the game to different receivers, as well as utilize his legs. So I think that if you utilize the play action, that's going to allow Josh to have success in this game.
My next key is make Josh uncomfortable. Pressure that right side. Have that pressure coming off from the right side. Make him move a way he doesn't want to go. Don't give him too much time in the pocket.
Okay, I like that one. I'm going to say third and foremost is offensive line, and this is something that it's a blood battle each and every play of every game. And the biggest thing is when you're going up against a guy like Christian Wilkins in the middle of the field, you got to be more aggressive, not only in the run game, but also the passing game. You got to be more aggressive. And I haven't seen that from an Aaron Cromer offensive line this season, and I want to see it today. Well, actually on Saturday, but not today. So I want to see it in practice today, but I want to see them be more aggressive as a front, in the front five. I want to see the trenches, one on each side of the ball. The first and foremost one is the trenches, one on offense. Because if you allow Christian Wilkins to get into this backfield, it's going to be a big loss for the Bills.
And my third key to the game sounds very rudimentary, but is relatively valuable due to what we've seen. Line up correctly according to audibles. There have been too many times this year that I've seen teams come out. The Bills have made some audibles, some changes, some shifts. Teams suddenly cannot line up appropriately due to it. Either they're lining up in the neutral zone, they're lining up out of position, they're not switching. There's going to be times, especially with Beasley, and there's going to be motion in the backfield. We need to know where that motion is going.
Yeah. I do agree with you there, though. That's something that Miami, as well as Buffalo, we both struggled with, is whenever there's a motion man or there's a jet sweep or something like that, we both struggle with it. And I do think that's something, that could be fixed very shortly. So by both teams. Now, I want to say one last thing. I'm going to slide over. I know we're talking in the same place because we're both doing this at the same time. But I want to say the defensive keys to the game, and that's going to be – I'm going to start with the first defensive key to the game, and that's going to be, for me, I'm going to say for the run game, being able to stop the running backs. And that's something that Buffalo struggled with in the first game, not having Matt Milano out there as well as other players that missed, like Jordan Poyer. And you got to be able to contain the run game, as well as maintain your gap and then tackle. So that's going to be my first key in the game. Stop the run.
Okay, my first key for the offense is pick up on the linebacker blitzes. It's going to happen, and you got to be prepared for it.
Yeah. I think that's going to happen in this game. I think it's more than likely going to come from Matt Milano. Remember last week when Matt Milano was in the game, what he did to Mike White, which was a completely clean hit. And also, remember last time that the Miami Dolphins played the Buffalo Bills, Matt Milano was the one that took out not Mike White, but Tua Tagovailoa. He's been excellent this season. He's been excellent in tackling correctly, and that's something that different players, whether you're in the 12 and under or you're in different leagues like that, the 10 and under leagues, learn from Matt Milano and learn the way that you tackle. That's the way that you're supposed to professionally tackle. So I would say my second key to the game is going to be lock up Tyreek Hill and don't let the speed beat you. So whether it's going to be two guys in coverage, whether it's three guys in coverage, whatever it takes, don't let Tyreek Hill make a big impact on this game. Last time the Bills played a receiver like this at this caliber was Jay Jetta, Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings. He went for over 160 yards, and Buffalo struggled to stop him. And no matter when he was on the field, he was making a play. You cannot let the number one receiver from the opposing team have an impact in the game. So you got to be able to stop the number one receiver. That starts with Trey White, and I know that Trey has been hurt. Got to step up in this game.
My second key to the game has a lot to do with the overall game plan. The Dolphins need to improve their passing to the running backs out of the backfield, especially in two-back sets. We need to use both of them. We can't just have Jim do everything all day long.
I agree. I do agree with you there. I'm going to say my last key to the game on defense is going to be like I said, the speed overall, not only from Tyreek Hill, but also out of the field. There's going to be a lot of plays where they're going to try and motion different players, as well as stuff like jet sweeps, stuff like that. You're going to have to worry about all the speed on offense. So you got to make sure that no matter what it is in those situations, you're prepared for it and you're ready for that play. And that's going to be tough. Let's go over the last thing that we're going to talk about, and that is, I'm sorry, your third. I didn't go with your third. I apologize. Go ahead.
My third thing is going to be utilize tight ends. I'll make it short and sweet.
Yeah, no problem. Let's go over the score predictions. But first and foremost, I want to do something real quick. I want to grab something off of a post real quick. I'm going to grab that real quick. I want to talk about that for just a second. So give me 1 second and we'll be good. Alrighty, guys, welcome back. I apologize for that delay. I wanted to grab something real quick. I wanted to pull it up. It's on my Instagram, and this is something that's most important. I want to talk about this. This is something that has been going on for the past few weeks. This is something from the Nickel City Mafia as well as the Punt Foundation, and I want to talk about this because this is something that means a lot, and it's something that it's the holiday season. I know that it's a difficult time for different families. And I want to talk about one family in particular. The family is the boy's name is Jack, and his family is trying to raise support for a special cause. He has cancer right now, and the Punt Foundation is raising funds for Jack and his family in order to pay for his fight for cancer. If you have anything, whether it's $1 or $5, whatever it is, or if you have more, you can donate to the Punt Foundation and help out baby Jack in his fight. Our link is in our bio on our Instagram page, and if you can give anything, that would be great. This is going to be going on our Instagram page as well as Nickel City Mafias and the Punt Foundation. So our link is on our Instagram page, and if you can donate, we would greatly appreciate it. Let's move on to our score predictions for the game. And my score prediction for the game is going to be the Bills coming out of this game with a win 35-17 over the Miami Dolphins. Dollar less, what is your opinion?
My score prediction is 27-24 Miami.
I like that. Okay. I'm going to say 27-24. That's a close game. I do think that it's going to be a game that's going to be fought very tough throughout the game. I just think that Buffalo has a little bit of an edge in the game. They have some to get some revenge, and the past 2 weeks have been a revenge tour for Buffalo. And that's the reason why I do think Buffalo is going to win 35-17 over them. But I do respect your opinion. I know as a Dolphins fan, you got to take your opinion. It's something that, it could happen. It very well could. Look at last time. Buffalo played Miami. They lost 21-19. And the last play of the game, they couldn't clock the ball. That's what happened. They weren't able to clock the ball. They couldn't get the field goal. And that prevented Buffalo from winning the game.
I definitely do think this can go either way. And I just don't like to pick against my team.
Hey, I understand completely. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on all social media platforms. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter, as well as on our new page and our website at GoBillsPodcast.com. I got to thank Dollar or Less for being on this podcast. I know it's a collaboration between both of our pages. It is something that we've been talking about for years to get him on here. And if you haven't already, go follow Dollar or Less Food on YouTube. He is doing tons of collaborations. We're probably going to do a collaboration. I don't know if we're going to do it today, if you want to do it on here, or do you want to do it later on where we do it on your channel and we do a collaboration on there? I know we talked about that.
Oh, I thought we were saving this for the secret verse for Saturday.
Oh, okay. Now, I will tell you guys this, okay? This is an open bet that we've had. You're going to see a handshake on right now. We're going to do it in front of the camera so that you know that it's me that's doing the handshake. We're going to do it in front of Dollar or Less's camera, okay? So that you can see. You can see my hand coming over, okay? That handshake that we're doing right now, this is for a certain reason, okay? If the Bills lose to the Miami Dolphins and get swept, I will have to wear a Miami Dolphins jersey live on my show. If the Bills beat the Miami Dolphins, we are going to have Mr. Dollar or Less Food wear a Bills jersey of my choice on a show of Dollar or Less. Sound fair?
Sounds good.
All right, we're going to do it. This has been the Go Bills podcast. We will see you next time for another edition of the Go Bills podcast. Got to thank my co-host for this episode, Dollar or Less Food. And I know I stole his slogan, but I'm going to allow him to take a moment and use his slogan and sign us off.
Thank you for watching the Go Bills podcast.
And Dollar or Less Food. And we will see you next time. As always, Go Bills.